UAE's federal data protection law finally came into effect on 2 January 2022, and the companies will have 6 months from the date of executive regulations to be issued by March 20, 2022, to get compliant with the law. The law focuses mainly on data subject rights, data breach requirements, data protection impact assessments, data transfer requirements, and notification and record-keeping requirements. UAE Data Office will be the regulatory authority and has the power to process all personal data by controllers and processors located in the UAE and outside the UAE, and can exempt UAE companies that do not process large volumes of personal data. This law applies to the processing of all personal data by controllers and processors located in the UAE. Processing personal data of data subjects within the UAE similar to GDPR. It also applies to every data controller or data processor established outside the UAE, carrying out processing activities in relation to data subjects in the UAE. The law does not apply to government data, public entities, the processing of personal data for personal use, health or credit data, governed by their own respective legislation, and organizations and entities established in free zones with their own personal data protection laws. The law does not cover personal health data or personal banking and credit data, and is not applicable to the UAE free zones. Both controllers and processors must develop such procedures and take such measures as required, in accordance with best international standards and practices, and commensurate to the risk and cost involved with the processing, to ensure an appropriate level of information security. The law includes a list of such measures to be tested and evaluated. Controllers, on becoming aware of any personal data breach, should inform the data office of the breach and any investigation conducted into the breach. They must also notify the data subject of the breach. Processors must inform the controller of any breach. Controllers must appoint a DPO in certain circumstances. Controllers must conduct DPIAs in particular circumstances. Processors must maintain a record of processing activities of the processing conducted on behalf of the controller, which must be made available to the UAE Data Office upon request. Controllers and processors must implement technical and organizational measures to maintain a high standard of data security appropriate to the level of risk. The law indicates that there will be a transition period of 6 months from the date of publication of the executive regulations for companies to achieve compliance. Individuals have the right to not have their personal information processed without their consent, except in specified circumstances, and can withdraw their consent at any time. Individuals can make complaints to the office. Administrative penalties can be imposed as part of a decision by the Council of Ministers in response to a breach of law or the executive regulations, and based on a proposal from the Data Office's Director General. Data subjects can file a complaint with the Data Office if there is a breach of law by a controller or processor. The Cabinet, based on suggestions of the Director of the Office, will issue decisions to determine whether actions constitute a breach of the law and determine the appropriate sanctions. Individuals also have the right to data portability and to object to processing and/or automated processing, including profiling. These days, even the data protection non-compliance in smaller and less important offices of a company group may now lead to significant ramifications. The efforts for being compliant with the new data law requirements are generally high. Not all requirements can reasonably be fulfilled at once. The company will have to assess what kind of data processing activities are of the biggest risk to its business, rights of the data subjects, as well as the risks that are likely to lead to high fines. We help companies allocate and plan their required resources and help in the implementation of a compliant data protection structure, including conducting data protection impact assessments. Want to know more about the details of this new federal data protection law from the UAE government? Do contact our experts today.